Hello everyone. It's a continuation of the discussion that we have had in the previous class. I have begun discussing the Victorian novel, and in the previous discussion we have touched upon writers such as Charles Dickens, Thackeray, etc. And today I will be discussing some of the other various influences on Victorian novel. For example, during this particular period, we can see the evangelical movements exerting a lot of control and influence over literature. And we know that in the previous class itself, I have discussed the didactic purpose and how even some of the writers, major mainstream writers, were forced to adopt a didactic element in their writings because of the influence of evangelical writers or evangelical organizations were powerful during this period, and they have had some control over the writings, and we can see they exerting some kind of a control in the development of children's literature as well, because the organizations like Religious Tract Society and the Society for the Promotion of Christian Knowledge, these organizations they have published children's literature or stories. For example, those stories featuring horrifying child deathbed scenes and dramatic moments of conversion, or those kinds of topics associated with the religious feelings, etc. For example, we have Hesba Stretton's Jessica's First Prayer, published in 1867, and also the John Bunyan's famous work Pilgrim's Progress was considered to be an essential family reading during this time. So they started focusing on values of self-discipline, pious endurance, and themes of religious quest, pilgrimage, etc. So this is an important stage in the development of children's literature, the influence of the evangelical activity, missionary works, evangelical organizations, etc. Also, another type of fiction flourished during this period is the type of fiction we call as Bildungsroman. I think you may be already familiar with Bildungsroman, a novel of formation, normally depicting the journey of the hero's journey through troubled childhood and adolescence, and achieving some kind of a moment of realization, etc. And normally depicting childhood and adolescence. We can see some writers like Bronte sisters, Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, Willett, then Charles Dickens, David Copperfield, Great Expectations, etc., and George Eliot's The Mill on the Floors, Meredith's The Ordeal of Richard Feverel. So these are some of the Bildungsroman type of narrations. And another thematic concern or conflict we can find in some of the novels of this period is the tension between romantic and realistic impulses that we can find in the novels of, we have already seen in the previous discussion, Thackeray. Thackeray's novels, we can see this conflict between the romantic and realistic impulses. We can see this conflict arising in the works of Bronte sisters, Charlotte Bronte, Emily Bronte, Anne Bronte, in every these three sisters, and we can see this conflict. And also, as I have already just mentioned, the Bildungsroman, Charlotte Bronte, she has developed a kind of female Bildungsroman. When we talk about Bildungsroman, normally it is considered as a male form of the male heroes, the journey of the male hero. That would be normally the tradition, but she has narrated novels of constructed a kind of a female Bildungsroman in which the struggle, the heroine struggle, not only with educational and occupational limitations, but with depicting the competing demands of reason and feelings. Those heroines, they may be experiencing challenges from educational point of view and also occupational point of view and also in an emotional point of view. That is why I said that the conflict between the romantic and the realistic impulses. We can see Jane Eyre, for example. She is a governess in the house of Rochester, and there is this challenge, the poverty and other kinds of social issues we can find in the novel, but at the same time her own emotions towards the male character Rochester. So this is a kind of a conflict we can see. So especially Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre and Annie Bronte's Agnes Grey, we can call them, either we can consider them as social problem novels, or since they are discussing the concerns, the problems experienced by the governors in at that period of time. But at the same time we can see that romantic impulses were also a major issue during this time. Especially it was during this period, especially in 1858, that the critic George Herbert identified realism, or focused on realism as the basis of all art. He declared that realism has to be the basis of all art, and we can see these realistic impulses working in all of these writers, whether it is Bronte sisters or Dickens or any other writers we can see. Then in 1860s we can find many sensation fiction, melodramatic kind of fiction. For example, works like Mrs. Henry Wood's East Line and Mary Braddon's Lady Audley's Secret. We can find such kinds of sensational novels during this period of time. Then another concern during this time is the influence of theatre on novels and vice versa. And again we can see some detective fictions. For example, Wilkie Collins published The Woman in White. These are some detective fictions were also getting popular during this time. Then another very prominent writer during this period is George Eliot. We can find her works like Scenes of Clerical Life, The Mill on the Floors, Adam Bede, Silas Marner, Middlemarch, etc. In these novels we can find again a lamenting of, a nostalgia for the past, and also depiction of the rural pastoral kind of lifestyle, etc. in the works of George Eliot. And another realist writer, or the writer whom we can call as a realist writer, is Thomas Hardy, whose novels are normally situated in the Wessex part. And in his novels like Under the Greenwood Tree, The Return of the Native, Jude the Obscure, Tess of the D'Urbervilles, we can see a depiction of the vanished or vanishing rural world, and also a realistic kind of narration. But when asked, he himself never identified, he never chose to identify himself as a realist, and he never approved of the term as well, because he says that art is disproportionating when we are portraying life as it really is. That's not a novel. We are taking some element of the realistic from the life and focusing on that and getting some kind of an elaborating on that or exaggerating that. So art is never fully real. That is what he says. Then we can find a kind of a highly experimental kind of a writer called Robert Louis Stevenson. There are so many works. He, for example, in his work like Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, we can find he has experimented with gothic, detective and scientific fiction kind of traditions in the single work. We can find gothic elements in the novel. It's a kind of a detective elements can be found, and also it's a scientific fiction. And his other works like Treasure Island, Kidnapped, etc. are also so famous. Then another major significant type of novels during this period is children's fiction, and we have already seen how the evangelical writers influenced the children's literature during this time. And then there are other types of writings like totally different kind of writings, like for example Arthur Conan Doyle. He is a very popular writer even in the present day. His detective kind of fiction, and the hero who is more famous than the other, Sherlock Holmes. Then there are other slim novels like Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray, you can find during this period. Then another significant moment in the Victorian novel tradition is the question, the new woman, the question of the woman question dominating during this period. You can find various writers, including the very famous Olive Schreiner's The Story of an African Farm was published during this period, and Sarah Grant, The Heavenly Twins, or The Beth Boot, some of the novels. And these writers, they have even experimented with, or they have tried their luck on short stories as well. So these are some of the major aspects of the Victorian novels. We can find even those Victorian fiction even influencing, even continue to attract the readers even in the 21st century. So I hope you may be able to go through all these, get in touch with, try to read some of these fiction. They are really so much interesting, and I recommend you to read. Thank you everyone. Have a nice day.